Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. This is an international webinar from Beacon Force, and I'm delighted to be hosting it for them. We're a partner for Beacon Force. So my name is Vicky Reddington. I'm the Managing Director of the Amplified Group, and I'm thrilled to be on this panel today with Nardali Rambarat, who is the HR Director for Scotia Bank, Caribbean, North and Central, and she has the delights of being based in sunny Jamaica, so it's a little bit warmer than it is for me here in the UK today. And we're also joined with Joe Muffat, who is the Partnerships Director and Board Member for Engage for Success, which is a fabulous organisation that I hope we're going to learn more about today. And Joe's day job, she is the MD of Woodreed, who's a specialist ad agency who use tools and techniques and creativity and insight into the advertising world to engage employees inside organisations. Now, we've been asked by Beacon Force today to host a panel for you on the importance of employee recognition and building a culture of employee recognition. And given the great guests that we have on as well, I think we'll start by asking Jo to give us a quick introduction from her side and her perspectives on employee engagement, which I think we're going to hear from an organisational perspective, which is wonderful.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vicky, for that introduction. Yes, I'm just organising the tech at this end so that I hope people can see my screen. Maybe thumbs up would show me that you can. Vicky, can you see are people able? Ah, yes, look, there it is. Marvellous, fabulous, good. Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much to Beacon Force for inviting me along. And I hope that what I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes will act as a bit of a scene setter for the topic of building a culture of employee recognition and kind of pave the way for the more detailed insights, which I'm sure you're going to hear from our other panelists. So yes, I'm Jo Muffat, as well as my day job at Woodreed, where I work with clients, helping them to create great places to work and high performing cultures inside their organizations. The hat that I'm wearing to talk to you today is as a volunteer for Engage for Success. As Vicky said, I'm Partnerships Director, and I also sit on the board as well. So I'd like to begin by just telling you a quick story. So 2011, just over 10 years ago now, we saw the launch of the Engage for Success movement at a breakfast summit at 10 Downing Street. It was attended by the then Prime Minister David Cameron and CEOs of many of the UK's leading PLCs, public sector, not-for-profit and employers organisations. And they met to recognise and importantly, put their names to the importance of employee engagement as a key driver of organisational success. And that followed the government commissioned report that had been commissioned by the previous Labour administration before David Cameron, which identified the evidence linking employee engagement to organisational KPIs, and coined the term the 4 enablers of employee engagement, and more about those in a minute. But that report is often known as the McLeod report. You may well have heard it called that. And Engage for Success now is the UK's leading voice on employee engagement. We are a not-for-profit movement. We are a social movement. We're not really an organisation. We are entirely dependent upon volunteers up and down the United Kingdom and beyond, actually, to provide evidence, research and case studies to help organisations create more engaged, more productive and more profitable workforces. And our purpose, which you're seeing on the screen there, is inspiring people and workplaces to thrive. And honestly, I don't think there's ever been a more important time for that now, wherever those workplaces may be and whatever format they take. So let's move on now to the defining our terms. I think Vicky talked about the title of this webinar, building a culture of employee recognition. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, for me, recognition isn't just recognition in the terms of rewards, in the terms of vouchers, in the terms of events, experiences and gifts, but recognition in terms of a simple thank you, the acknowledgement of a job well done in the moment. It's also about celebration too. I think recognition and celebration absolutely go hand in hand. Celebrating successes, whether they be small day-to-day successes or the bigger celebration of objectives successfully delivered, celebrating behaviours, celebrating values being lived. And for me, I think it's really important to think about a culture of recognition as something which is woven into the fabric of an organisation, the how we do things around here. It's very much not a tick box exercise. It's not something you come into work and say, oh, I'll do some recognition today and that's me done for the week. Yes, programs, platforms, systems are all really important and they can all help make this process easier, more engaging and more effective. But they'll only ever be tactical stick-ons if you don't think about the kind of culture in which these kind of approaches can thrive and be truly meaningful and deliver on your organizational strategy and objectives. So how do we think about these things more strategically? Well, that original Engage for Success report that I mentioned, the co-authors, David McLeod and Nita Clark, identified what they call the 4 enablers of engagement, which you can see on the screen now. And these were very not a one size fits all, but certainly a really, really useful lens to use, a simple and useful lens to use, actually, when thinking about improving employee engagement and thinking about planning to put your people at the heart of how you do things in your organization. These were what they found to be the traits, the 4 common traits shared by organizations with higher than average levels of employee engagement. Now, it's certainly the case that the last couple of years has absolutely pushed the people agenda to the fore. But I think we'd probably all agree it's a fairly mixed, and at the moment, certainly in the United Kingdom, a mixed and uncertain picture. We've got job vacancy figures at record levels. We've got research saying that a significant percentage of people are planning to leave their employers in the next 12 months, the so-called Great Resignation. Now, those on the one hand mean that employee engagement and experience are key, talent attraction and retention are key. We talk a lot about engagement. There's no shortage of talk about well-being, productivity, and of course EDI. Quiet quitting, a term that's come into the parlance in recent weeks. But then again, you balance that with fears of redundancy, fears of recession, fears of the worst recession in the UK that we've had in decades, fears about cost of living, fears about job security. So, those can counterbalance each other, which is why I say we're really in a fairly mixed and uncertain picture today. But those 4 enablers can do so much more than simply create an environment of engagement. I think today what I want to do is talk to them for you as a lens or framework, as something that is intrinsic and central to building a culture of recognition too. So I'd like to just start by taking you through each one in detail, and then that will be me done, and I hope I'll set the scene to hand over to the others for you. So the first enabler is around having visible, empowering leaders who can tell the story of your organization. It's all about purpose. It's about why I'm getting out of bed in the morning, and it's about quality of leadership. And that purpose has absolutely come to the fore in recent years, and it is not going away. We are all motivated at work by the purpose of the organization we work for, but research shows that millennials, those born in the 1980s and 1990s, and who are close to making up 75% of the workforce, certainly likely to be so in 2 or 3 years' time, find that even more motivating than sort of boomers such as myself. So purpose is not just about marketing puff. It has to be at your core. It has to drive your strategy and your decision making, and people need to engage with it and understand the part that they can play. And that's where leadership come in. They need to be able to articulate that. They need to be able to articulate a compelling and authentic purpose. So they also need to be able to cascade the narrative, and then this is really where we come into the culture of recognition and celebration, to celebrate the stories of that that celebrate the stories that make that purpose real, recognizing the teams and individuals who are delivering on them, so people can absolutely see that this is achievable and they can see the part that they and their team can play. Equally, our visible empowering leaders are really important because we copy them. It's innate human behavior to copy leaders. So with leaders visibly recognizing and acknowledging their people's achievements, then that behavior cascades down, is picked up by managers and others further down in the hierarchy. And if you're using an employee social media or comms platform, one leader like on your employee social media platform will open the door to a floodgate of similar engagement, similar activity from perhaps people who've been lurking in the shadows and thought that they perhaps didn't have permission to engage in such a way. So really, really important to creating that kind of culture. The second one is around line managers. And I'm sure we can all take a few minutes to think about the best and the worst that we've had in the course of our careers and how those best and worst managers made us feel. The best ones actively promote and encourage our careers. They give us space to grow. They don't micromanage. It is a truism, and it still is, that people don't quit their companies, they quit their bosses. So Enabler 2 is all about the role of line managers and team leaders to train and support their people, to lead them well and treat them as individuals, coaching them and stretching them. That's always been a crucial role in any organization, and that is absolutely key. Leaders, team leaders, managers need to learn the softer people skills, particularly in a hybrid workplace, if that's the kind of organization that you're involved in, where those people skills have to be absolutely applied with a great deal of intentionality and become very obvious. So when it comes to recognition, a line manager or team leader who knows their people inside and out, who knows their preferences, who knows what they like, who knows what drives them, is absolutely crucial. Who knows who's going to be motivated by a night out with a paid for babysitter and who's going to be motivated by a spa day, who's going to be motivated by a bottle of Prosecco, who by a single malt, or who, importantly, would be very offended to be offered either. It's about being individual, it's about being inclusive. And actually, from a Engage for Success perspective, if the importance of line manager, the importance of team leaders doesn't chime with you, then have a look at our website, because there's some really great evidence on there that shows that engaging your people as a team leader is also good for your own career too. You know, there's a quid pro quo to be had there. Third enabler, and I'm romping through this now very quickly because I'm very conscious of your time. Third enabler is all about employee voice. Now, as consumers in the wider world, we expect to have our voice heard. We're asked for our opinions every time we shop anywhere, access any services, visit any online website, and it's exactly the same in the workplace. One of the biggest risks to any organization is reputational risk, and yet employee voice listened to could have prevented many, many things from becoming a scandal. It's often called an organization's best smoke alarm. So find ways to listen to your employee voice. We know as well that employee voice drives innovation and process improvements. The original research that Engage for Success did found that 59% of engaged employees say that work brings out their most creative ideas. But if you ask the same question of disengaged workers, only 3% will agree with that. So Enabler 3 is about innovation, it's about creativity, it's about listening to your people in much more ways than simply an annual survey or even quarterly pulses. Checking in, asking people what they need, listening and acting on feedback, and giving feedback to those suggestions and to those ideas. So what does it mean from a recognition and celebration perspective? Well, peer-to-peer recognition is absolutely crucial. It's about acting on employee voice, giving your people the opportunity and the permission, coming back to that leadership following thing, to say thank you, whether that be up the organization, down the organization, across the organization, creating ways, platforms, methods, and they can be informal as well as formal, to nominate colleagues and nominate peers for formal acknowledgement. It goes a very, very long way. And the final and fourth enabler is about organisational integrity. And this is about making sure that the values on the wall are reflected in the day-to-day behaviours of everyone in the organisation at every level, that there is no gap between what we say we'll do and what we actually do, how we behave. If we do that, we'll create trust. And that surely has to be one of the defining issues of the times in which we're all living at the moment. We're all judged by our actions rather than our words. And values have to be credible, they have to be authentic, but without behaviours supporting them, they're meaningless. And behaviours which are ignored when the going gets tough or don't apply to the toxic leader or the toxic manager will simply end up in a drawer and be dismissed as just empty words on a poster. So successful organisations know that values and behaviours is not about having rigid codes, but instead giving their people freedom and autonomy to interpret their values and behaviours in a way that is relevant to their role and function. So when it comes to creating a culture of recognition and celebration, to begin with, it's about role modelling values and behaviours. It's about actively acknowledging and recognising them when you see people demonstrating them if you're in a leadership role, acknowledging them when you see your peers doing so, celebrating successes, sharing examples through your internal comms channels to encourage the wider team, and importantly, not allowing toxic behaviours to go unchallenged, which is absolutely the kiss of death to a healthy workplace culture. So if you make your values mean something. If you say it's a safe place for people to speak up, then make sure it is. As I say, call out behaviours which are toxic and don't align with your values, and equip your managers and your people to do the same. Recognition and celebration aligned to those values and behaviours can then follow and is intrinsic to that culture. Awards programs, stories, badge to the values all help to demonstrate that these are real, they're meaningful, and they're being lived on a day-to-day basis at all levels rather than simply being words on a poster. And I'm conscious of my time, so binding all those together is effective internal communication. And so by using those 4 enablers as a simple framework, you can begin to transform your culture into one where recognition and celebration programs can really thrive and take root. So thank you very much. If you want to keep up to date on employee engagement and find out more about Engage for Success, there's some details there on the slide on the screen. You can simply scan that QR code if you're nifty with your phone camera in order to sign up there for the weekly newsletter. And if you'd like to get in touch with me to talk about some of this some more, or to learn more about how you might want to get involved with Engage for Success as a volunteer, then I'd love to hear from you too. And there's some details on the screen there now. And I will stop sharing and hand back to Vicky.
Thanks so much, Jo. That was absolutely wonderful, and very nifty to have a QR code on there. So I've just taken a quick one of that. So much appreciated. So you've really given us the 50,000 feet view from an organisational perspective. What I would like to do now is share my slides, please, Ariel, and we can just look at a little bit more about building a culture of employee recognition down at the team level, down at the organisation level. So I mentioned that I am the managing director of the Amplified Group. My background is the tech industry. So I grew up in the tech industry. I was a European and global leader for Citrix Systems, if you've heard of Citrix. I then moved on to a company called VMware, which was another top 10 software company. It's actually it powers the cloud for us. And I think we all take the cloud a little bit for granted now, but VMware is that infrastructure in there. But in both those organizations, the tech industry is about change and fast pace. And if you can see here, really interesting to hear what Jo was talking about. She pretty much covered all of these, but these are our 4 values that we talk about for speed to market. Because funnily enough, although we work in the tech industry, and by the way, we support other industries too, it's just the fact that that's our primary market. although we work in the tech industry, the most important thing that we say to any organization that we work with is that the tech industry is powered by people, and it's how you work together to get things done that makes the difference, that gives you your competitive advantage. And so, listening to everything that Joe just talked about there, this is the equation that we use in terms of, we put purpose first, the reason why we're together. Joe talked about trust, and we're really talking about, in a team, it's a safe place to say what you really think, to be able to ask for help, to be able to admit mistakes, and it's a learning culture. And if you have that trust, that makes such a significant difference to how you work together. But what we also find is people need clarity. They need to be able to have that clarity so that they know what's expected of them. Very often when we're driving change, people don't change. It looks like they're resisting change. They actually don't really know what's expected of them. So clarity is enormously important. And then simplicity, quite simply, the simpler you keep things, the faster you can go. It's why we've got stick people here. It's very much our image. It's as far as we are aware, the more simple we keep things, the simpler we can go. And our job is to work with teams and organizations to ensure that they can put this into practice on a daily basis, just as Joe was talking about, living this daily, and that it's not a poster on the wall, that it's real, that they're celebrating success. And just a quick mention of Beacon Force here. I mentioned we're a partner of Beacon Force. We know when we've done a good job. Our job is to empower the teams that we work with to ensure that they are self-sufficient, that they can do this on their own, that they've built it into muscle memory. And that's where Beacon Force comes in so brilliantly, because we leave the organizations we work with Beacon Force implemented, and then they can track on a daily basis just how healthy those teams are and how engaged those teams are that they're working with. And it really is a bit of magic, and we're so grateful for our partnership with Beacon Force. But we're here today to talk about employee recognition. And when I was asked to support this panel, I thought to myself, well, what does employee recognition really mean? So if we can move on to the first slide. This is what I was thinking about. When I thought about employee recognition to start with, I'm thinking about, well, it's rewards and it's awards and it's promotions and it's people moving up the ladder. And it's all of those big things and the programs that support all of that. But actually, employee recognition is so much more. So if we think about this from the other perspective and move on to the next slide, then this is really what we're looking for. We're looking for people to be heard. They want to be involved and they want to be appreciated and be thanked. And that really is at the heart of that daily practice that Joe was talking about. And just to give you a super simple example. So very recently, working with a leadership team, it was a team that we were just starting with and we were just doing our discovery interviews. And I was speaking to a leader and they told me that there'd just been an all hands meeting and they hadn't been asked for any input into that all hands meeting. And they weren't being asked to speak at it. And yet they were part of the leadership team that all hands was representing. They didn't feel heard. They didn't feel involved. They didn't feel recognised. So it's not just the big programs. It's what we're working with on a daily basis to make sure that we have got the trust. Because let's face it, with the economy as it is at the moment, we're going into tough times and we will be stronger if we work together. And so one of the things that we have as we look at team experience, because if you feel like you're working together, your team is being recognised, you're being recognised as an individual within that team, my goodness, you can make magic happen. And so we recognise people that go through our programme as team experience ambassadors. They are best practices. They are that third contributor that Jo was talking about in her 4 different elements that is needed for employee engagement, those leaders and managers that are giving that best practice, that are making sure that that team is involved, that is creating that psychological safety, we give them the badge of being a team experience ambassador, and we're giving them that recognition so that then they can go and spread the word and they can be the shining light within their organizations as best practices. So if we move on to the next slide, I thought this was really appropriate because although we've had Jo talking at the 50,000 feet level, I just talked a bit about it at the team level. The other really important piece is let's come down to the individual level. And when we talk about recognition, I think the old-fashioned way of doing this is about the leader that shouts the loudest, that dominates the conversation, that bulldozes through, is the leader that gets recognized and gets rewarded. If you haven't heard of Adam Grant, I really recommend that you follow him. He is just an incredible thought leader in this space. And I love this quote from him where he says, actually, let's stop rewarding the people that dominate the discussions and let's start rewarding the people that ask the questions, that seek the best answers. Because there are those of us that dominate, and I know I'm one of those and need to zip it because I've got that self-awareness now. And there's those of us that are quieter, but we have some wonderful ideas, but we need to be asked our opinions and we need to have the environment to do that. So let's start, as Adam says here, starting valuing quality over quantity. So I really thought that was very appropriate, really, in this. Let's look at how we get our employees recognised in a different way. And then finally, I really just want to bring it back to the business, because so much of this sounds really soft, and these soft skills. So many organisations, and I mentioned that we're working in the tech industry, but all organisations are needing to transform. We are in constant change. And this is a fascinating insight from McKinsey, who have looked at the changes and transformations that organisations have been making and that they've been working with over the last 20 years. And they've basically said that only 30% of organisations are successful if they only focus on the changes that are happening versus actually the health of the organisation and the people bit. If you put equal emphasis, and I'm not talking about the HR leader working this, I'm talking about the leadership team owning this too. If you put equal emphasis on what you are changing in the business, but how you build all of those pieces that Jo was talking about earlier, and I'm sure we're going to hear about in our next from our next presenter, Nadali. If you put all of this into practice, then you up your odds of success to 80%. So with that, I'm going to just move on to my last slide, which is just giving you some little details here of how to get in touch with us if you want any more information. We've just actually, Jo, you were talking about the surveys and things that your organisation does. We've just done a survey about employee productivity for new hires and how important it is to set all these new hires that have come through the great attrition up for success. So if you're interested to find out any more about that, then please do get in touch. And with that, I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, Nadali Rambarat from Scotiabank, who I'm sure is going to put all of this into practice for us. So thank you, Nadali.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for that introduction, and Jo before, and most of all, thank you to Beacon Force for having us here today. Such an exciting topic and something that we're all very passionate about. So I'd like to share with you my slides. Please be warned that there you may see some repetition from what was shared before, but it just shows us how true our messages are when it comes to employee recognition. So we're going to start with some stats, and I thought this was really, really interesting because in 2020, Great Place to Work looked at 1.7 million employee survey responses across small, mid-sized, and large companies globally. And it was very interesting, but not surprising to see that the most important drivers of great work, 37% of employee respondents, would have identified that recognition or recognize me is a driver of great work. And oftentimes when we're looking at presenting or doing our HR strategy, or we're thinking about what our employees want, what's going to motivate them, and we think for sure about compensation and pay or even promotion, sometimes we wonder if the reward and recognition programs that we're running as HR professionals, if it really makes sense for employees. And I've been in HR for over 15 years and have led various people strategies, but my specialization is actually in transformation through mergers and acquisitions and reorgs. And oftentimes we wonder, does reward and recognition, is this program effective? Is it working? Is it necessary? And I'm here to tell you today that based on these results and everything that Joe and Vicky spoke about before, this being recognizing our employees and having that culture of recognition is truly important. And why is it important? Well, the survey goes on to say that our employees who feel recognized are 2.2 times more likely to think that innovative thinking is embraced, and 2.6 times more likely to think that promotions are fair. And we're going to go into that a bit in our next slides. Again, as I mentioned before, Joe and Vicky did a fantastic job of setting the stage. So you will see some repetition. But as I go into it, I'm going to try to give you examples of how we actually put this into practice. I do work at Scotiabank, and I've been in the financial services and banking industries for a little over 15 years now. And I can tell you surely that many of these practices work, and we've been able to sustain very high employee engagement scores at Scotiabank in the 85 and above consistently over the past decade. And it's because of our very strong employee recognition program, among other things. Now, employee recognition matters now more than ever before. Joe spoke about the beginning about the war for talent. And we need to make sure that our employees feel like they are part of the strategic framework. And at Scotiabank, once we roll out our strategy for the year, we ensure that our employee recognition program is very aligned to that strategy, so that employees are rewarded and recognized in a timely manner and a consistent manner, to make sure that they see how they fit into the strategic framework of the bank, and ensure that their work matters. They have purpose. When they come to work, as Vicky was speaking about earlier, every day, they know that what I'm doing here matters, and I will be recognized, I will be thanked, but more importantly, I am contributing to fulfilling the strategy of the bank. And it really creates an enthusiastic environment to work in, and ensures that our employees feel enthusiastic and are engaged. And more than anything, that sense of accomplishment and self-worth, especially in a time now, and as we said, why it matters now, in a time now where people are constantly, and our employees are constantly comparing themselves both on social media around the world, and we're not sure sometimes how we're doing. People have second guessing themselves, and giving, rewarding and recognizing, making sure that someone knows what they're doing matters, really creates that sense of self-worth, and it goes a long, long way in employee engagement. Now, the thing about employee engagement, and Joe spoke about this at the start, is that it has changed. And Vicky, you touched on it as well, the evolution of employee recognition. It's not just about an awards ceremony. You know, it has changed. Our employees want to feel valued. So employee recognition has evolved, certainly since my time in HR to now, an evolution has taken place, and an even bigger evolution has taken place in terms of the world of remote work. And what we found is that we've had to be very deliberate in the world of remote work to demonstrate employee recognition. People are no longer interacting every day in the traditional sense of work. So they're not seeing each other. They can't get a physical tap on their back or a physical handshake or hug to say thanks. So we have to be very deliberate. And when a good job is done, make sure that we reach out every day consistently, whether it's a message, an email, to say thank you. And it's more than giving thank you. In the world of remote work, we need to give feedback. And that feedback, our employees crave immediate feedback. So it's not just about a thank you anymore. It's a conversation about why. Why? What was it about what I did that was so great? It's about being intentful, and it's demonstrating that you know what your employee has done and you want to thank them. And you can also link that to overall strategy, or the overall strategy and how they fit into the big picture. It's a deeper conversation than just thank you. So we found that our employees are thirsty for positive affirmation, reinforcement, immediate feedback, and acknowledgement of a job well done. And an evolution continues to take place that, it's no longer about doing reward and recognition at a milestone, for example, on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. While those are necessary, we need to have frequent and consistent recognition, almost on the spot and immediate. And when we give our employees feedback and we tell them thank you and we show thanks and demonstrate thanks, we need to follow that up with a conversation around growth and development. You've done well here. This is where I see you in our organization. This is your future. So that it also rewards desired behaviors, and our employees know that they have a future with your company. And that's really, really key. And employee recognition plays a huge role in transformation and change within an organization. As I mentioned before, I've been through several reorgs, several changes, both internally and external acquisitions. And I can tell you for sure that employee recognition is a very, very important tool when it comes to changing culture. And what we've done at Scotiabank that has worked tremendously well for us in our last transformation is that we linked employee recognition to our new core values. And both Joe and Vicky spoke about this, about the values of an organization. And so, for example, one of our core values is integrity. And we've designed our system in such a way that that is what you send recognition on in terms of peer-to-peer recognition. And we make sure that we make a big deal about integrity, and we reward integrity. We give examples. We talk about it constantly, especially in the banking industry. Integrity is important everywhere, but especially, in our financial services industry. And Joe spoke about this at the start in terms of employee recognition spurring innovation. And we saw in the previous slide that from the Great Place to Work survey, 2.2 our employees are 2.2 times more compelled to spur innovative thinking. And we've definitely seen that at Scotiabank. Once, we reward our employees and we give them the space to think, to even make mistakes. So perfection is not the only thing that's rewarded. The thought process and putting your all towards a project, being creative, being innovative is rewarded as well. There's been a shift, and that's a shift also within the organization and the transformation that we want our employees to be creative. We want them to be innovative. We want them to think that they are in a trusting, not think, but know that they are in a trusting environment. And whether you make mistakes or not, we are there for you and we support you. We reward your creative thinking. And overall, I want to say that more than anything, during transformation and change, employee recognition is a true demonstration of trust and commitment from our leadership. Because our leadership has said from the start that, we will reward you, we will take care of you, we are committed to our employees. And in a situation or within transformation and change within an organization, trust and commitment from leadership they're really, really, really key. And one of the things that has been critical for us in our employee recognition program, I mentioned it before, but I'm just going to say it again, is that it has evolved from just a simple thank you. It's now a full feedback conversation. We ensure that when we recognize an employee, we not only say why that they were recognized, but we give feedback about their performance. And even if it's some one-on-one recognition, to speak about opportunities for improvement, because it really pours into the employee and makes it worthwhile. So it's intentional, it's focused on the employee and their future with the organization. So lots of success around employee recognition, and I can talk about this for hours and hours because I'm really truly passionate about it, and I've seen it work, and it's a very key to the fabric, as Joe spoke about at the start, of our culture here at Scotiabank. So what I want to leave you with is that for employee recognition to work, we need to make sure that it's aligned to strategy and our employees feel a sense of purpose in the work that they do and accomplishment. Feedback has evolved from just being thank you to full-on conversation around growth, development, opportunities, and having full-on conversations. Feedback, reward, and employee recognition has moved from being milestone to being frequent, timely, and it's used as a tool for innovation and creative thinking. My last slide that I want to leave with you, it's around leadership, yes, but a big part of leadership is about rewarding and recognize our employees. And I want us to take a minute now to step back and think about a leader who we remember and who really influenced us and inspired us in our lives. And the leaders that we remember are the ones that provided us with a safe place to grow. And I spoke about that before, using your employee recognition not just to reward perfect behavior, but to reward creative thinking and innovation. Reward that environment, and who opened career doors for us. So use your employee recognition conversation to talk about opportunities for development and growth and open career doors for your employees. And defended us when we needed. Those leaders that we remember are the ones who were there for us. So use your employee recognition to make sure that your employees feel protected and defended. And the leaders we remember are the ones that recognized us, developed us, inspired us, for sure led by example, and told us our work mattered and forgave us when we made mistakes. So thank you very much again, Beacon Force, for having me here. It's indeed been a pleasure. I'll hand it back over to you now, Vicky.
Thank you so much, Nadalee. That was so insightful. Really, really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you. We have got about 13 minutes left. We've gone all very precise, haven't we, since we've lived in our virtual worlds. So with that in mind, we've just got a few questions. So, and actually, I think the first one, Joe, if I can ask you. So the first question that's come in a climate where people are worried about making ends meet, is recognition more important than a pay rise? How very timely and appropriate is that?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the simple and obvious and shortest answer is no. I don't think recognition is more important than a pay rise, because I think with all of the things that we talk about when we're talking about employee engagement, when we're talking about recognition, these are all strategic approaches to putting your people at the heart of your business thinking and your business planning, but they're not instead of doing the right thing by your people in terms of paying them fairly for a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They are not instead of making sure that they can feed their families or whatever is required. They're not. It's not an either or. It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You do have to get some of the basics right. That being said, approaching your people with this kind of thinking does enable your organization to be a bit more resilient. It gives you a bit of breathing space. It gives you a bit of wriggle room because you've created an environment. So I think my mic might be making banging noises. Because you've worked to create an environment of trust and mutual respect, and that's really, really important. So no, you can't just say, well, I'm not going to pay you, what you're worth, and by the way, here's a voucher. It's not going to cut, is it? And by the way, I'm not going to pay you what you're worth, but thanks a lot anyway. I'm being flippant, but you take my point, I think.
Yeah. Nadalee, have you got any feedback on that question?
So it's something that comes up all the time, and I touched on it a little bit because we often wonder, should we reallocate money from one into the other? But what we've seen is that without employee recognition, you find that engagement falls, right? Engagement decreases. So yes, while the pay rise is important, I think they're both important, as you were saying, Joe, and they go hand in hand and complement each other, and one without the other really has a negative impact.
Yeah, for sure. And just if anybody in the audience has got any more questions, then please do let us know. But Nadalee, I was really fascinated by what you were telling us around the fact that now we're all working remotely, thank you isn't enough, and that it's almost deeds not words, isn't it? It's that extra bit of substance behind that. So have you got some more tips on how to make employee recognition more meaningful?
Sure. And I think I touched on it a little bit, but it has to be timely, right? You can't wait anymore when something happens now. And when we think back to the way we worked before, if someone did a job, when you walk outside in the corridor, you would tell them immediately. So we need to be intentional and we need to be timely. When something happens in the world of remote work, send the message. Send the message. Pick up the phone immediately and say, great job. That was excellent. That presentation was fantastic, because it goes such a long way to give that immediate feedback.
Yeah, yes. I mean, even doing things like this, if you're in a room in front of an audience, you can see, can't you?
Yes, you can
what
see
response you're getting from the room. Doing this, we've got no idea.
No,
if
you
we've
have
still
no
got an
idea.
audience.
somebody would give you it when you're face to face. Somebody would give you a thumbs up. Somebody would
Yeah.
smile, nod.
A smile.
Great job after. But
Yeah.
sometimes when we log out from the call, that's it. Everybody, goes on to their next task. And being a leader means being deliberate. We have to be
And
deliberate,
intentional.
timely, and
Yeah.
intentional. Yes.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the words of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Everything. It's about being intentional. The things that
Absolutely.
you can't rely on serendipity and
Yeah.
ad hoc. You've got to
No.
be intentional about how you do things, what you say. Make sure that what you want to happen actually does happen, rather than just assume it will. And there's some. I haven't got the figures directly to hand, but there's some really interesting data about the need of the younger generations entering the workforce and their hunger for that feedback. And I sort of was alluding to the difference in terms of millennials and the importance of purpose, particularly for that generation. But when it comes to recognition, the younger generations entering the workforce are absolutely hooked on the endorphin of the like. It's this social media, looking for the likes, looking for the feedback, wanting to know that they've done the right thing, and they need it all day. Whereas, old fogies like me, we had a performance appraisal once a year and we were grateful, and it's such a shift, and for the better. I mean, absolutely for the better. And so as Nadali says, in the moment is absolutely key.
In the
Yeah.
moment. Sometimes I wonder, though, does everyone want that immediate feedback? But some people just got really good at suppressing it and waiting, and some people are impatient and
Yeah.
It
want
just
it
depends,
now.
doesn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, we do a lot of work around profiling, and we use DISC because we love it, because it's just so
Yes.
simple. And you have to really think about who your audience is and how they want to have that feedback, because some people don't want to be given that feedback in front of lots of other people. They want it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it comes back to knowing your team, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
this
comes back to
again
that.
comes back to a line manager or team leader knowing their people, knowing what their psyche is, understanding their needs, knowing that actually Vicky would hate to have somebody talk to her in public about what a bloody great job she did
Yes.
in that meeting. I would hate to be told off in public for swearing on a webinar, but it's those differences, it's
Yes.
knowing
Knowing.
knowing your people as individuals, what makes them tick, what they want, what they respond to, and knowing that they might want to be talked to all day and every day about the positives and the negatives and where they can improve, as Nadali said. And other people would actually find that stifling and would much rather have
Thank
those
you.
conversations differently.
Yes.
Yes. And
So-
you're right, Joe, because it's the individual and it's not a one fits all. Employee recognition is not that at all.
So the next question that we've actually had in is about, where does the responsibility of employee recognition lie? Does it start with the CEO? Who wants to take that?
I'll let Nadali go first.
So employee recognition is directly linked to employee engagement, and it's a driver of employee engagement. And naturally, as part of your people's strategy, it's owned by HR as the face of it. However, it can only be effective if it starts from the top and transcends through all levels of the organization. So I want to say it's and I don't know if I'll answer the question properly, but it's twofold. I do think that HR, perhaps it sits with HR in terms of the leader, but taking the lead, but the CEO and everyone in the organization has a really big part to play.
Yeah.
I'd endorse that. Absolutely everything you said there. And I think all I would just add to that is the point I made in my opening slides about the importance of leadership setting the tone for how things are in an organization. And if they set the tone by acknowledging, recognizing, celebrating what they see in whatever way that might be, whether storytelling, whether it's it's thanking people in the corridor, whether it's acknowledging somebody on their promotion that they'd heard about, whatever it might be, then that gives permission, and it creates an environment where people think, "Oh, that's the way we do things," and that cascades down. So
Yes.
it's senior leadership cascading it down and
Yeah.
almost giving permission, but it is also line managers, team leaders who can create a little microcosm of recognition and culture and celebration within their teams if they really, really want to, because you could do it. It's not difficult to do. You just need to be intentional.
Intentional. That's exactly what I was just
Intentional.
thinking there. Yeah.
And I
think the other
feel
thing
like
that, sorry, Nadalee.
if sadly though, Joe, if HR doesn't take the lead on some of this, it won't get done.
Absolutely.
And it will fall down. And we've seen that from all our stats that it's a very, very important part.
Yes.
So while everybody plays a part, HR has to lead it.
Totally agree, Nadalee. Yep.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, what we know is that an organization's culture is incredibly fragile, and it can be great, but you have to work at it every day, and everybody has to be the caretakers of the culture. But we need HR to keep us accountable to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
hold our feet to the fire.
Yeah. The other thing that I just want to pick up on very, very quickly before we finish is we've talked about Timely, and I know Beacon Force wanted us to set this up, and this is not about Beacon Force, but actually that's one of the things that I absolutely love about Beacon Force is that it is so real time, and the clients that we're working with find it so beneficial because they're not having to wait. They can actually use the data on a weekly basis to know how to have that one-on-one manager conversation, and it's so valuable for them. They found it really empowering and timely, and gives them the substance that you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
So it's really great to hear you putting that into context. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Just double check if we've got any more questions. No, I think we're good. So with that, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you both virtually. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This has been fun.
It has been fun. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you both.
Thank you for having me as well. Nice to meet you both. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Beacon Force, and thanks to everybody for listening. We hope you found it valuable.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.